In October of last year, I had the immense pleasure and honor of being a guest on 5 Watt World. And during the conversations Keith and I had leading up to our live stream, we were talking about the Fender Vibroverb and how important that amp actually is to John Mayer's sound. And we touched on it during the live stream as well. So go check that out if you guys haven't already. It'll be carded on your screen and linked in the description down below. But that had inspired me to make this video kind of discussing the Fender Vibroverb and how it really is one of John Mayer's most underappreciated and under-discussed amplifiers that has actually been a huge part of his sound over the years, and not just a part of the John Mayer trio like a lot of people I do really think believe. So sit back, relax, and in today's video we're going to be doing a deep dive into John Mayer's history with the Fender Vibroverb, and we're going to be discussing this amplifier, some key performances that he's done with it, and why just in general I think this amplifier is just so underrated and under-discussed when it comes to John Mayer's sound. When we are talking about the Fender Vibroverb and John Mayer's sound, we need to clarify exactly what model we are talking about. Now, John Mayer has exclusively used the 1964 black panel Vibroverb. Now, it's not to be confused with the brown Tolex 1963 version, which some sources online incorrectly claim that he has used. John has only ever used the 1964 black panel version, the vintage one. Now, in the early 2000s, late 90s, the Fender Custom Shop actually reissued both the black Tolex 63 and the black panel 64 Vibroverbs, but John has exclusively used the vintage black panel version, so just keep that in mind for today's video. And if after watching the rest of this video today you find yourself wanting a Vibroverb, of course the vintage models are just immensely expensive. You can look up on Reverb, they're just, they're worth a lot of money. They're highly, highly sought after. But the reissue Vibroverb is, not as much as the vintage one, that's for sure. And my really good friend Jake Loosemore, who I'm sure a lot of you guys know, he actually owns one of the reissue 64 Vibroverbs from the Fender Custom Shop from the early 2000s, and he has just graciously sent in some clips that he recorded specifically for this video today. So massive shout out to my friend Jake. All of his information is going to be linked down in the description below, so check him out if you haven't already, and just enjoy some of these clips of Jake playing on his 64 Vibroverb. Without question, one of John Mayer's biggest influences when it comes to the guitar and just the overall sound of the instrument is Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now, SRV famously used a Fender Vibroverb, and a couple of them, during his short but just absolutely amazing career. And if you want just one of the best examples of Stevie Ray Vaughan and a Fender Vibroverb, listen to the solo on Let's Dance by David Bowie. Yeah, that performance from SRV and that solo, that is with a Fender Vibroverb, the 1964 version, which, of course, you have to really assume is a good chunk of the reason why John got led on to these amplifiers, as they're really heavily credited with being a key component of SRV's sound. And we'd actually see John take this amplifier and, kind of make it part of his sound 20 years later, since the very first time he first started using it, all the way really to present day. He's still using this incredible amplifier. So that's kind of, I think, the reasoning as to why John really started with the Fender Vibroverb and fell in love with that. I mean, it's a beautiful sounding amplifier, there's no question about it, but that Stevie Ray Vaughan influence here is key. So when did John Mayer first incorporate the Fender Vibroverb into his rig? Now, I know what 99.9% of you guys are going to say. Well, during the John Mayer Trio. And you would actually be incorrect. The very first time John used this amplifier was in 2003 at Elton John's AIDS Foundation Oscar Party after show. And there's some really great shots of John with this amplifier. Now, if you actually look at this photo, he's plugged into the vibrato channel, but the second input, not the first. I don't really know why, but just something interesting to point out. So this is actually the very first time we see John with this amplifier, and not during the John Mayer Trio like I assume majority of people would think. So leave a comment down below if you didn't know that John actually started using this amplifier that earlier on. I thought this was really interesting, and just doing research, stumbled upon this shot and was like, hey, that looks like a Vibroverb. And then I zoomed in, and it was. What I love especially about this shot here is that it really captures one of the key ways John uses the Fender Vibroverb, at least the context. It's a guest appearance he is making for, a smaller crowd, but where he still wants, obviously, a great sounding amplifier that has plenty of headroom and power in order to, fit his needs for the show. And this is one of the main ways John still uses the Fender Vibroverb to this day. Smaller shows where he doesn't need to bring his entire rig with him. He's not going to haul a bunch of 212 cabs, dumbbells, and everything over. Just brings a Fender Vibroverb and he's all good to go with a small pedal board. And that's exactly what he did in 2003 at this performance at the Oscar AIDS Foundation for Elton John. It's at this point here we then fast forward to 2005 and talk about the John Mayer Trio. Now, the Fender Vibroverb was a centerpiece of John's amp rig during this era and just a key component of the overall sound during this time, which is really a favorite of a lot of people, mine included. Now, for 95% of the John Mayer Trio performances, the Fender Vibroverb was flagged by a 2-Rock custom reverb signature and a Dumble overdrive special. And as we know, kind of the magic John Mayer amp combination is a Fender amp, a Dumble amp, and a 2-Rock amplifier. Those three amps together really create his sound, and that's a formula that John has stuck with for a majority of his career. Look at the Sob Rock era. You have a Fender Bandmaster, 2-Rock John Mayer signature, and a Dumble steel string singer. That is kind of the main amp setup that he always runs in order to get his iconic sound, those three amplifiers together. And it's no different with the Fender Vibroverb in this context. I genuinely theorize that the Fender Vibroverb was a key component of John's sound in that era. I think that there maybe was a bit more Fender blend to his sound, and that's part of the reason why the trio tone is so unique when you look at all the different eras and their sounds. It's different. This era stands alone, and I really do theorize that the Vibroverb had a bit of a hand in that sound for sure, especially the Dumble ODS as well. Those two amplifiers for sure, I think, kind of together really helped create that just truly special Mayer Trio era sound. And of course, we can't talk about the John Mayer Trio without talking about Continuum. The John Mayer Trio paved the way for Continuum to be born. And the gear that John used during the John Mayer Trio era is really the foundation of what became Continuum. We know he used this pedal board from the trio performances in the studio for the Continuum recording sessions. And as well, we have shots of the Fender Vibroverb in the studio during the Continuum sessions as well. So you can pretty much guarantee that at some points when you listen to Continuum, you are hearing some tracks that are at least part of the Vibroverb blended or just solely that amplifier. That amplifier you can guarantee is on Continuum. We have the shots of it in the studio. In 2006, there was what you could call a deep cut performance where John performed just weeks before Continuum released at the Mod Club in Toronto. And the Fender Vibroverb was actually used as part of his rig for this show, but the Fender Vibroverb would not return for the Continuum release show, nor would it return for the Continuum tour. So this is kind of really one of the last mainline performances we see John using the Fender Vibroverb. After that performance at the Mod Club in Toronto in 2006, the next time we would see, or I guess rather hear, the Fender Vibroverb was in an Instagram post. Now, this is another kind of deep cut thing that not everyone's probably even aware of exists, but John Mayer made a really cool cover performance of Justin Timberlake's Love Stoned I Think She Knows interlude, which, number one, is just a great song, an interlude off of Future Sex Love Sounds, one of my favorite albums. Actually, I'm a massive Timberlake fan, for those of you guys who did not know. See him twice live in concert. Best live shows I've ever seen in my life. He's just another level of performer. It's just insane. But anyways, for John's performance and cover of that song, he actually used the Fender Vibroverb. This cover that John did is not only just a really great connection, at least for me, for two of my favorite artists of all time, but the tone that he was getting out of it was just absolutely crazy too. It's a combination of that Collings he was playing, the Space Echo, the NG2 fuzz as well, but then all through that Fender Vibroverb. And this is a really kind of, again, deep cut thing he uploaded, but I've seen a lot of people try and cover what he did over the years in his kind of interpretation of this song. And it's just really cool to see that in 2008, the Vibroverb was still kind of hanging around. Even though he wasn't using it for anything major, he still kind of had it and was actively using it. Now, as I mentioned, we know for a fact that the Fender Vibroverb was used in the studio during the recording sessions of Continuum, and we can pretty much guarantee that that amp is on that record. Now, there is one other time we know for a fact that this amplifier was used during recording sessions of another one of John's albums, although I'm pretty confident that we've heard it other times on different albums. We just don't know exactly when, but I'm pretty confident we've heard it other times during recordings as well. But this album is Paradise Valley. Now, during the recording sessions, before John actually took over his own Instagram, a photo of a Fender Vibroverb all mic'd up being used in the studio was posted to his account, and the exact time that he was recording Paradise Valley is when this photo was taken. So we know for a fact that, at least for this album, it's probably a couple stems, couple tracks of the Fender Vibroverb on it. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I genuinely believe that the Fender Vibroverb is heavily underrated and under-discussed when it comes to John Mayer's sound. I truly believe this amplifier has been just a key component of his sound over the years, and that's part of the reason why I'm making this video. And to help back that all up is the fact that in 2019 with Dead & Company, John took two of these amplifiers on tour with them, and they were what he used for his sound during the fall tour of 2019 with Dead & Company. Really interesting to see him kind of divert from the usual vintage deluxe reverb and Alessandro modded deluxe reverb combination that he really likes, or just the different Dumbles he's used over the years as well. This is kind of a different, slightly oddball choice out of his Dead & Company amp history, but hey, he took two of them on tour with them, and he sounded great. Okay, we're getting through this, you guys. We're getting almost done. And of course, in 2020, right before everything happened, can't mention it on YouTube without getting demonetized, that's for sure. One of the last performances we'd see from John in a while was at the Hotel Cafe backing up David Ryan Harris, and it was actually the live debut of the Silver Sky Nebula. This performance is just crazy for a number of reasons. I mean, every time John backs David Ryan Harris, there is just a different dynamic in musical chemistry between the two of them than when John's kind of fronting the band. It's just always really, truly great. But the amplifier that John was using for this performance, the theme of today's video, you guessed it, was his Fender Vibroverb. And his pedal board was really small too. Just a Keeley Katana, a TS-10, and an Octopus. The essentials and all he needed. And this is just, I remember when this performance came out, I just was like, oh my God. It was nuts. It was absolutely fantastic. John and everyone else, David, they all were on fire that night, that's for sure. It's at this time we're going to move on into the Sob Rock era, and when John first started promoting these songs off of Sob Rock, he did a handful of live TV performances, well, live in studios, what they were. They weren't actually live. You guys know what I'm saying. And for his amp rig for all of these performances, the Fender Vibroverb was one of the amps that he used, and overall this amp rig was really interesting. It featured an old school T-Rock custom reverb signature instead of John's own signature T-Rock. And it also had Dumble Steel String Singer 004 as part of the rig, and then, of course, the Fender Vibroverb. So, a bit more of a trio-esque amp rig, that's for sure, which was really just cool to see. And, I mean, it'd be awesome to see him actually tour with this kind of setup again, you know, kind of going old school on us. But the Vibroverb is what you heard, or at least part of the amp rig that you heard for all of those TV performances, and for me, at least, it was a real treat getting to see this amp rig. I loved it. I thought it was really great, especially that old T-Rock as well. Just something really cool, and I didn't totally expect John to still have one of those even. Speaking of the Sob Rock tour as well, in Boston for one of the last shows, I think this was the second last show of the entire tour, John joined Alexander 23 on stage, who was opening for him in this back leg of the tour, and he performed a cover of Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, which again, this is one of my, just, the tone with the Jackson in this performance is just absolutely nuts. I love John when he's using a Charvel and the Jackson soloist. I really just love the whole vibe he puts off when he's playing a different guitar other than a Strat, or at least these two kind of more 80s inspired guitars. But anyway, again, theme of this video, what amp did he use? It was the Fender Vibroverb, and yeah, this is one of actually my favorite performances of the Sob Rock era, and it's not even like a mainline Mayer performance, but it was just wicked. It was brilliant. The last instance we have of John Mayer using the Fender Vibroverb was when he performed with Maren Morris at her show in Los Angeles. They performed To Hell and Back, and John, sticking with his preferred choice for an amplifier for a guest performance, was the Fender Vibroverb. And again, this is just kind of one of the key takeaways here, is that the Vibroverb for John seems to really be his go-to amplifier for when, you know, again, he doesn't need to bring his full amp rig with him. He doesn't need to haul around 212 cabinets. He can take a great sounding, high headroom, very powerful combo amplifier that's going to get him the tone that he wants and sounds great, and is just perfectly suited for these smaller performances. And if you guys kind of think about the entire history that we've gone over of John with this amplifier, I think you guys can agree with me that, well, majority of people, maybe you, watching this video, really thought when it came to this amplifier that, oh yeah, it's one of the amps he used during the trio, one of those Fender amplifiers, that was that specific part of his sound, but it really didn't do much more than that. But after kind of, listening to the history of this amplifier in today's video, I think you guys can agree with me that it deserves a little bit more recognition and discussion, because it's an amplifier that John has gone back to for 20 years. We're going from 2003 all the way to 2022, and maybe in 2023 we'll see him use it as well. Who knows, right? For maybe these solo performances in the electric section that John is doing for the upcoming 2023 tour. Maybe he's going to have a small Vibroverb on stage with him for the small electric part of the night. You never know. I don't think he really needs to bring a full amp rig for just him on stage, right? So it's possible we might see this amplifier this year as well. But I just really wanted to make this video going over it because, again, I think this amp deserves a little bit more discussion. I think, though, for us, if you're wanting to look for an amplifier that really nails the Maren thing, I still think a 2-Rock is the best way to go. But the Vibroverb really deserves a bit more discussion. You guys know what I'm trying to say in discussing this amplifier. The Dumble sound, the 2-Rock sound, and the Fender sound are all that magic combination of John's sound. But that Fender part, a huge part of that over the years has, again, just been this amplifier and a big piece of that puzzle. And with all that said, that concludes the history of what I truly believe is one of John Maren's most important amplifiers, the Fender Vibroverb.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.